participants here in Riga, in presence, and our panel. And we will be talking about mission-critical networks. It has been another year where mission-critical networks have been tested throughout various calamities in the region. And suddenly all the things you think you know and you think they work, suddenly we have to look at them again. Countries and services involved in critical communications are considering switching to mobile communications, and we are seeing that being also done in some places, in some situations. But is a time of crisis the right time for such a change? And experts on this panel will discuss on the 3GPP technology standards that enable mission-critical mobile networks, vulnerabilities of existing legacy systems, challenges of changing networks, and more. And we have quite a panel. So first, please welcome the moderator, the coordinator of Broadway Net, David Lund, and also board member of Public Safety Communication Europe Forum.
Okay, thank you, MC. And now for a different MC, mission critical. So in this panel, what we'll do is we'll explore what we mean by mission critical, what public safety are doing to drive a mission critical ecosystem, and what other cases need to be mission critical as well. So, and that's in the context of these private networks that we talk fondly about with 5G. So our panelists include public safety mission critical need from a national perspective in France. He's not on the screen yet, he will be in a moment. And how industry are addressing this wider challenge of public safety and other mission critical needs. So we have representatives from Frequentis, Nokia, Rohde & Schwarz, and Cisco here, so key names in the communication world. And you know, what is it that is mission critical? What do we mean by the phrase mission critical? Google it, right? I Googled it. So a mission critical task, service, or system is one whose failure or disruption would cause an entire operation or business to grind as a halt. It is a type of task, service, or system that is indispensable to continuing operations. So we're talking here today about the context in 5G, 4G, 3G, 6G maybe one day. But what is it in mission critical terms that real end users need? So if I would like to invite our IT team to play the first video, please. Thank you.
The main aim of the Project Broadway is we want a pan-European communication. And the most important thing is it needs to be mission critical. You probably know that no one should access the network that, for example, police, rescue service, and firemen are using. And the new system needs to be secured from external influences, but it needs to work all over Europe. We are facing more and more critical incidents, bigger incidents, like weather incidents, floods, earthquakes, fires, and so we always try to help our neighbors, and the neighbors try to help us. At the moment, the situation we actually have is we need to provide them radios so that they can talk to us on an incident site. And the aim of Broadway is that each practitioner, no matter which organization he is from, may bring his own device and can be included into a mission.
Why is it mission critical though? Because commercial mobile networks are kind of implemented on a best effort basis. If we make a phone call and that phone call drops, we don't care, we just call again. We send a text message, it doesn't deliver, we try to send it again. If an emergency services responder has a dropped call or unable to send data, that could be a matter of life and death. So really, mission critical means the implementation of those mission critical services must be reliable everywhere. Reliable and secure, resilient and secure. So the point to make really is this problem of mobile being deployed on a best effort basis. You know, as I said there, it's about making sure that that connectivity is available all of the time. The point is everyone in society needs to be safe and that we all rely on mobile comms. If there's anyone in the room who doesn't have a mobile phone, get out. You're in a 5G conference. But, you know, it's not just about here. Safety matters everywhere. We need to be safe in cars. We need to be safe in our smart cities. We need to be safe in factories, in our workplaces, all of those things. So we seek to address, you know, key societal values here. We're not really, in mission critical consideration, we're not really chasing a faster, lower latency technical communication. Yes, we need some of that, but it's the mission critical element. We heard earlier this morning about the fact that the word availability was missed in some cases, considering the security of mobile comms. So in our Broadway project, we tasked industry to find solutions for mission critical and needs of public safety, and we now pull together the governments to work together to prepare for a BroadNet, so a pan-European mobile broadband system for public safety. And actually, if you think about it, if all mobile networks are deployed mission critical first, everybody benefits. Business critical, factories, workers, consumers don't have to redial anymore, yeah? Things like that. So we'll see. So the ability for responders is quite important. Can you please play the second video? And here you'll hear some different views from some of the suppliers involved from an M&O perspective as well. Thank you.
Imagine if you have something like a fire, a big forest fire, or some other big incident going on. What do people do? Of course, they are trying to call their relatives. They are trying to find out what is happening. They are surfing the internet. They are blocking the data. And so it's very important for us to have the highest priority within the network for that we can talk to solve the problem.
Mission-critical solutions very much depend on priorities on the networks, because the solutions are not needed on sunny day scenarios. They are needed when they are in the worst conditions with the strongest loads and need to solve issues when actually they are under most stress.
We're working on a daily basis with the first responders and with our Ministry of Defense, and all like one are saying that this is a very, very big deal for them, because there's a lot of cases when you just can't get a normal network coverage that just enables you to do the job. For example, search and rescue.
This project is important because we need to make sure that first responders always can rely on our mobile network. For implementing mission-critical communication services, it's at the utmost importance that the user can rely on the mobile network and it's always there and always has access to it.
The whole point of mission-critical services is to ensure that when devices are using those public networks that everyone is using, to ensure that those devices can have priority over the others when they are using the network. So the high priority is a special parameter that we ensure and we send towards the network to ensure that they have the right bandwidth, that they can send the right data dynamically in real time. And the preemption part comes only in the case if there is congestion, too many people using the network, to drop down all the commercial and public people to ensure that only the critical services remain with the highest priority. And this is extremely important in case of catastrophes and natural disasters or any other issues.
So if you want to know more about what we've been doing, you can go to the website for broadway-info.eu, and there's plenty more videos you can see. So what I'd like to do now is invite the panelists to speak some, less from me and more from the panelists. And I'm going to turn first of all to our online participant, Renaud Meliers from the French Ministry of Interior. About 3-4 weeks ago, France announced a major program to deploy mission-critical mobile broadband across France for public safety. So Renaud, would you mind giving us a 3 minutes intro. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you for having me. So even if I'm not here with you, I'm glad that I was invited to take part in this panel. So my name is Renaud Méliès, and I work for the French Ministry of Interior. We have this RRF program in France, so Network of Future Radio Network. And it's mission critical based on 3G standardization technology. So I'm very involved. I've been very involved in 4G, 5G standardization because I'm a 3GPP delegate, and I've been a 3GPP delegate for many years. And I've recently joined the Ministry of Interior to be the representative for the Ministry of Interior in 3GPP. So what we are trying to do is move from a legacy technology, tetrapole, tetra, PMR technology, to a new technology, to broadband technology. And it's quite a challenge for us. It's like, I don't know, can you imagine if your personal phone would be 2G and then you have now a 5G phone? And it will be the case for our end user, for our first responders. So in France, we have this program, the RRF program, that has just been announced a few weeks ago. And this program is meant to give our first responders the ability to reach everyone that they are tasked to do. So whether it be in France or across borders. So we will have this technology in France, and we are very involved in also cross-border communication. So this Broadway project is very important for France. So in a nutshell, yes, mission critical is a challenge. Mission critical based on 3GPP standards is a challenge, but we are very optimistic that we will provide the right service with the right quality of service, and that our end users will be able to save lives because mostly that's what they do, and that's what we want them to do, saving lives. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Renaud. Hope you have a good journey home. I'll turn next to Gunther. You're involved, Frequentis were involved as a key supply, leading a key supply team within the Broadway program. Can you give us some of your insights into mission critical?
Yeah, of course. For Frequentis, at the end, we are, as company, active since decades in this arena. So mission critical communication, aircrafts, air traffic controllers, policemen, all these stuff. So all these industries, you can look at our homepage. I think what in mission critical now, Broadway in a nutshell brings around the complexity that is necessary in order to enable what was said here. Doing mission critical doesn't mean in future to put one system there and make sure that it is highly available. What we've seen in Broadway and what will be the future is having several systems, shared systems, and make sure, and this is what we do in our portfolio with Mission X, that they play together with a lot of different technologies. In Broadway, I think we had 15 technology companies covering a lot of stuff. Putting that together and make it work and be able for the ministries to sign, it is available. Because at the end, we are doing here serious stuff in terms of responsibility. We need to provide technologies, put them together in a way, and prove that somebody can say, yes, it's available in the cases where seconds count and where lives are at stake. So, and this is our mission, and therefore we called our portfolio also Mission X. One thought maybe then, before I hand over, there is, apart from all the technology and so on, there is also a, let's say, process or innovation challenge. Currently, voice technology is there. It needs to be migrated. It's a much different task than to do this, because this works somehow in every country, for good or for bad, and there is a lot of expectation how it should work in future. And on the other hand, you have a lot of data communication ideas. which is not working today in mission critical, where a lot of innovation comes in place. Everybody wants to have a WhatsApp or Teams-like working environment, but how that would look like in mission critical, nobody knows. So that's what we have to solve the next years.
Yeah, and it's quite a challenge.
Yeah,
But
it's a cool challenge.
Yeah, it's a good challenge. Let's work on that and solve that problem. There's nothing worse than your video call with your colleagues dropping, and I always say, well, can we not have a mission critical WebEx or a mission critical Zoom, or let's try and solve those things. Thanks a lot, Gunther. So over to the rest of the panel, which are not necessarily public safety background. I mean, that's fine. So Lisa, from Nokia, how do you see this mission critical challenge from the Nokia perspective?
I mean, we are also involved with a lot of public safety
Yeah.
projects, but you're right, mission critical is much more than that. So in Nokia, we are a vendor of the network infrastructure, and when we talk mission critical networks with our customers, then it's really all about the availability and the reliability. And we talk, with our customers that the network needs to be available 99.999% of the time, or even more nines, to add to that sometimes. And an answer to that, a solution to that can be that they build their own private network, which is not a new thing, because if we look at the railways, and Frequentis know this very well also, they have had that for many years, for instance. Because when they have a fast-moving trains with a lot of passengers, they need to rely on that the communication is there at all times, because otherwise a big accident can happen. So in the railways, they have for more than 20 years been deploying GSMR networks, which is a closed private network. They control themselves, they operate themselves, and nobody can have access to that, not even the passengers. So that we are quite familiar with. Now what is coming now with 4G, in particular with 5G, there's coming all these new functionalities, and the data communication is becoming very advanced, and a lot of possibilities is coming there. So what we see is that the industry is really getting their eyes open up for putting a lot of mission critical applications into a 4G or a 5G network. And here, imagine if you're controlling a nuclear power plant, or whenever you have a self-driving vehicle or robotics and so on, you need to have that availability at all times. And that's why we have seen during the recent years that in 4G, private networks has become very popular among some of these industries, heavy industries. And with 5G and all that functionality, it's just becoming more and more a trend that they build their own private networks.
Yeah, private networks for sure. Yeah. So Anne, what's your view from Rohde & Schwarz?
So I just can agree to what she said. So no, definitely, Rohde & Schwarz is known as a test and measurement company throughout the complete telecommunications ecosystem. So we are also working close with our partners there. And we are driven by the technology that's behind in our solutions. Also the critical infrastructures, many of the critical infrastructures today see us as a trusted partner when it comes to enabling communication, when it comes to securing communication. And Gunther already mentioned airports. We are also in the critical infrastructure of airport, of harbor communication, air traffic control, mobile network testing, spectrum monitoring, so many of these areas. And I really liked it that you brought up the private network aspect, because this is when I look from the mission critical setup. Of course, they bring in new functionalities like push to talk, like group calls, these things we don't have in the public networks. But what they also bring in, they bring in different requirements for reliability, for quality. And we also see a lot of parallels there to the private networks. And for us, if you think about the reliability, it can be a quality criteria or a measurement aspect, but it can also be a disaster or a backup recovery plan that you need to have in place. It can be a mobile air traffic communication shelter that you have to bring certainly to a place in order to do a physical recovery of some of the things. So this is...
Thank you. So actually it's not just about the technology, it's the processes around it as well. that's for sure. Yeah, yeah. So over to Mads then from Cisco. Yeah, so you connect everything together, right? So what's your view on mission critical?
Yes. So from Cisco's side, for those of you who have not heard about Cisco before, we are one of the world's largest networking companies. So naturally, our perspective is coming from the network and data security point of view. And we work with mission critical in many different areas, from transporting SCADA traffic in utility market, in oil and gas, in mining, to connecting street lights and traffic lights, and also banks that has been proven to be very mission critical during financial times. And from our point of view, one side of this coin is, of course, enabling mission-critical data to be transported over a wireless wide area network, like 5G, like 4G, like LTE 450. Another side of this coin that we work a lot with is how to enable this transition, to leverage these mobile networks into these environments. And that sets certain requirements to the equipment that actually generates the mission-critical data and the mission-critical data that is being transported on mission-critical sites. Now, with that in mind, we do see a very clear trend when it comes to these building mission-critical network. And that is that they're built at the core to be resilient. Now, to build a resilient network, we usually see 4 things you need to consider. The first thing is it really needs to be reliable. There's no point in having an on-demand doctor providing support to ambulances over video if the doctor cannot differentiate between a human head and a potato because the video quality is so bad. The other thing you need to consider is the survivability of the equipment in these environments. If you have a gateway or a camera in a vehicle, like an ambulance, you really need to make sure it can survive all the vibration in the car. And the third one is redundancy. You basically need to build around the concept of failing, predicting failure. One example could be if you want to use 5G as a backhaul connectivity for police cars in a city. That's fine, but sometimes a mad guy just drives way outside the city borders and the police have to follow. And the coverage for 5G might be limited in those areas, and then it will fail over to an LTE coverage, for example. And the last one, fourth one, which should be the first one, is keep security in the conversation from the beginning. We see way too many mission-critical networks being built with retrofitting security. So that's kind of our point of view.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that final word on security really rings true. I think, we have to build that in right from the start. That's absolutely crucial, for sure. So I think we've touched on some of the answers to my questions already. Thank you. But I'll ask Renaud first. There you are. I can see you now. Hi. From your view, so what prevents a mobile system from being mission critical? Is it the technology, economics, or just a tendency to stick to old ways of working? What do you think?
It's a little bit of everything. So let's start with the technology. We are changing the paradigm here. So we are moving from narrowband technology to a broadband technology. And right now, we have the standards. So we think that we can deploy mission-critical networks based on the standards, but we are pioneers here. So we are trying to deploy a new network based on standards that are maybe not, let's say, proven. We will need to test and certify that those equipments are mission critical. And being mission critical is not only a network, the core network, it's everything. It starts with the device. It starts with the application. And you also have spectrum, you have transport network, transmission network, you have the core network, you have the mission critical services. Everything has to be mission critical, end-to-end mission critical. So it's a huge challenge to make sure that we have a mission critical chain. So that's on the technology. And the other aspects, we know 3GPP standards for commercial users, for the public. It's quite new to have mission critical networks, and operators, mobile network operators, are quite new to the life-saving business. So in one way, we are trying to use what is already existing for public networks and make it mission critical. So we cannot just trust the operators to do the right thing. Maybe we also have to go and change the legal and regulatory framework. So for instance, in France, with this new PPDR operator, we will create new laws, new regulations that define what is a mission critical operator. We will define what is national roaming. At this moment, national roaming is nowhere to be seen. But in France, we will have 4 operators. We will have 2 operators with mission critical quality of service, priority and preemption, and we'll be able also to roam on the 2 others. So we have to adapt the regulation and the legislation for this. And mission critical is bringing also new services. So if I have a body-worn camera, which is mission critical, I have to be able to use the data, the video I'm taking. So what about GDPR? What about how can I use it? How can I store it? How long? For how long? So we also have to adapt the legislation for the use of those new services. So let's not stick to old ways. Let's try and make mission critical a reality.
May I?
Yeah, please go ahead, Ruggensa. Yeah.
I mean, based on the network, there's a lot now, but what you said is you need to change legislation and so on. Will you just use existing networks and try to maybe use national roaming for or improving the availability? So you have 4 networks, and if they all have to be available for these mission critical end devices, then they all should have a very high connectivity. Do you also consider to again add some private network components, or maybe in cities operate some backup radio access networks or open? There are many scenarios you could think of. Do you plan that, or do you want to rely purely on mobile network operators?
So the coverage in France is for mobile operators is quite good. We will have a 98% coverage of the territory in France in 2025. But sometimes we will need some additional coverage. So we will have also the use of mobile base stations. We will have the use of rapid response vehicles. So that's about resiliency, having the best coverage possible is ubiquitous connectivity is what we want. So we are also looking at satellite services also for our connectivity. And for the private networks, we are also working with the critical infrastructures. We are working with the power plants. We are working with the railways. We are working with everyone. And those partners will have their own mission critical infrastructure, and we want to be able to interoperate with them. So we want to be able to use their private networks for coverage. We want to be able to talk to them, to interoperate with their mission critical services. So that's one thing. So you talked about national roaming, but Broadway is about international roaming with mission critical quality of service, and it's a quite different subject. So I think we could talk for hours on this. I just want to give the chance to other panelists to take the floor.
Yeah, we certainly could talk for hours on this. Lisa, please.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add is about if you can use commercial operators' mobile network for mission critical. I mean, if you look at nuclear power plant or whatever it may be, you know, where you really need this availability with all these nines, as I talked about before, right? So it's maybe there is the coverage, but can you really rely on having the network there all the time? So because I'm not sure that the commercial operator is contacting these people here when they, for instance, are doing an upgrade, and we all know there's a risk of an outage when you do an upgrade, or maybe have the necessary backup or the necessary redundancy and all these things. So that's why my answer would be no for the time being. If it's real mission critical, then at the moment that has not been the focus of most of the mobile operators. But I can also see that it's moving more and more into that direction, and also with the possibilities that 5G is giving, then it really also depends on the level of mission critical network that you need. So
yeah, exactly. Knowing the need.
Sorry, a possibility to go there and say, okay, I do some, for example, Open RAN elements for a power plant, to say if everything fails, there is still connectivity, at least locally.
You can definitely mix and choose and have several solutions, and this is also what we see, you know, to make it as robust as possible, so you're not just relying on one solution and one technology.
Okay. To add on that, I think there are multiple ways how to realize it on a technical. You can add a slice, you can do a private network, so I think the technical realization is probably not the blocking point here. It's more like it's driven by the consumer use case. So really, what is the use case for the end user? And I see these are different use cases in the case, because if you would ask a firefighter, what is important for you? He would name a couple of criteria that if I would ask everyone in the audience, everyone would say, yes, definitely, reliability, good video quality is also important for me. But I think the definition of the criteria is different. Let's take the video stream as an example. If you do a video stream and you get a little bit blurred in the video, yeah, it's not nice, but still you can continue the video, and otherwise you just go back and watch that second again. If a firefighter in an accident is using a drone to have a coverage and the photo and the video done there, and he has the same scenario, he might take false decision based on what he's seeing. So it has a different impact. It's really about the impact we are having. And this, for me, is the blocking point.
Yeah. Sure. Stuart, anything to add here?
No, that's good.
Okay. Great. I think it's an interesting point that Renaud mentioned there about if a public safety responder is on that nuclear power plant, and the coverage is there by the private network on the power plant, is it actually a private network, or is it still attached back to the, kind of mission critical, semi-public back to the national system? Private networks, can it still remain fully private, or can we have those little back doors to add additional mission critical functionalities like this?
You can, if I may, you can choose. I mean, yes, it can remain a fully private network.
Yeah.
You really can do that. But if you want to, you can also choose that you can connect it to, for instance, your public safety network. I mean, this is how you choose it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Anything to add there, Anne? No?
There's just a question for me. What do you think? How much, let's say, attention those networks then need in terms of administration? Is it like, I know there is a lot of self-configuration in 5G, but on a network level, they are usually focused on the nationwide rollout and so on, and when it comes then to campus network, then the people say, yeah, I want to have this and that and this, and how much effort would it be to configure those networks? Do you need an own team, or is it just some clicks? How would it work?
It can be quite simple actually to set up a private network, surprisingly simple and easy to set it up. And the thing which is different between a private network for mission critical, let me say for mission critical compared to commercial mobile operators is also that when you have a mission critical network, you're not interested in upgrading very often. You are not interested in really doing changes because we all know that most outages happen when people go in and touch the network, and you don't want that. So you want longer life cycles of your software and hardware and all these things. So that is a big difference compared to a commercial network.
And also, I would not see this just negative, that there is a sequence, you have the commercial network first, and then you have probably the mission critical network, because if you look at how a public network is deployed, the new technology 5G, it was first in the big cities. And there is learnings out of that deployment, and that learnings goes into the deployment of the rest of the network and also helps to make the network more mature. So I think this could also be seen as a natural process in order to drive it into the higher requirements of reliability, of performance requirements, of security as well, right?
And I'm just going to reflect on the conversation we had yesterday evening, actually, about the monitoring of the availability of so on. So availability has been the key word of the day, I think. So what can be done there to actually assess if the availability is still maintained? Yeah?
Exactly, because you named a very crucial point in our opinion. In a mission-critical network, it's not enough to set it up once and then trust that it's operating. You have to implement that kind of monitoring that ensures you whatever parameters are changing in the scenario. And let's take another private network as an example. If you are in a factory, you talked about the multiple nines, the 5 nines and the 6 nines. You have a mobile environment. So this means whenever there is a metal shelf that you place at a different place, it can destroy the complete coverage at that place of a network. So you have to have a way to monitor it continuously in order to ensure that the network is operating as it should be.
Feels quite fragile, and when you say it like that.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, and that's the technical challenge we are also looking a lot into, because when you refer to, let's say, industry or plants or whatever, when we go on missions, we are also moving around. So monitoring means also monitoring different places. If I don't know, but police is following the drug case I think we had in Broadway. Yeah, there is the monitoring becomes quite complex because you're hopping networks. But I think that's the technical challenge we want to solve.
Yeah, thank you. So we were about 2.5 minutes in, so I think just give you each one of you about 30 seconds, I would say, to give some final remarks. Yeah, Mads.
Yes, 30 seconds. We at Cisco usually see that for most problems today, you have a technical solution that can solve it. It's usually more about getting the people and operations also turning together with technologies. I think that's been pointed out today, that it's possible to do a lot of the challenges that have been pointed out. It's just actually doing it is the hard part.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, with 5G, and this is a 5G conference, and with 5G, the use cases are becoming so big, and we are only now seeing the top of the iceberg, I think, of all the use cases that we may have, you know, 5-10 years from now. And many of them, or some of them, is requiring that the 5G network is mission critical. So this is where, in my belief, I think that we will see a lot of private networks, because then you have the control of those networks. But I'm very curious to see how this will develop and how the use cases will develop, because there we have a learning curve in front of us, and the industry have a learning curve in front of us to really utilize the 5G networks.
Yeah, we're definitely learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the panel here shows it with the very discussion that we are having. It's important to have that discussion in the industry. It's not a single player who can say, I do this, so we have to work together to really think about what is needed, what are the requirements, what everyone needs to do, what everyone needs to contribute to make that, and don't wait too long until testing it. Your Broadway is a perfect example. You have to start testing it. On paper, multiple things look perfect that are in reality not.
Yeah,
So.
put it in the hands of people and
Yeah.
get that feedback, yeah. Gunther, few seconds if you wouldn't mind.
Really few seconds. I think crucial for making that faster work is what was said also, the regulation and the definition of rules by the states, laws, how that is applied and what are the requirements is quite important in order to move it. Because I see that in many industries, drones, public safety, public transport, aircraft, if that is clear, then also the MNOs and technology companies can move quicker.
Yeah, thank you. Renaud, final word, very quickly.
Yeah, yes. So we work better in cooperation. So I would advise every person that is watching this, either live or online, to join the Broadway BroadNet project. So I cannot urge you enough that we are changing the world right now. I think Europe is being on the front line of mission critical communication at the international level.
Thank you, Renaud.
Thank you very much. Before I ask any questions, round of applause to the panelists. Thank you. Jan Jansons is writing on the platform. By the way, we will have some 5 minutes also to take questions from the audience. But Janis is asking, Mads and Lise already mentioned that and touched this question is, how can cybersecurity be affected by the introduction of 5G in the mission-critical communications and applications? So once more, who hasn't touched that question yet? Anything else to add, maybe? So it is about the things you talked, but anything else?
I mean, it's important. Of course, it's really important. And that's also why we see when we talk private networks that there is really strict rules on who can actually have access to that network. That is crucial. And then, of course, I think all companies here, we are developing all kind of security functionalities and features and so on into our system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is also a level of trust there that is happening because companies are starting to leverage service providers' networks and transporting more and more critical information on those networks and basically handing over the security part to that provider, taking it out of their hands. So that's definitely a trust issue that is also happening these days.
Yeah, maybe one important aspect. Can you imagine a firefighter putting in his credentials because of locked out by the networks? So there is quite a usability aspect to that, and also mechanism. How can I make sure that the right people are accessing the right information? Can you imagine a policeman losing his mission-critical phone and is not locked enough? So there are many simple things to be considered still and not yet done, but very important. Yeah.
Hmm? All right. Anything to add, David?
Yeah, I think the cybersecurity element is problematic historically because it's been a case of let's go and hire a consultant to do that. But actually, it should be embedded within everybody's mentality. Everybody who's involved in developing and deploying these systems must have an understanding of the security and understanding of how weak their position is in the whole result of the mission-critical network. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
And to add on that, just one last thing. Cybersecurity is more than having a firewall in place. Yeah. That's also very important. It doesn't stop behind the firewall. So.
And it should be really convenient to use, otherwise people will find a way just to overrule it. All right, thank you.